Welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with entrepreneurs who've raised capital. We uncover the tips, tricks, and techniques they use to get investors to write a check. Strap in and turn it up.
Hi, welcome to another episode of How I Raised It, produced by foundersuite.com. Today I have Charles Jones of Lucid Mood. How is your day going, Charles?
It's going well, Nathan. Thank you for inviting me to your show.
Glad to have you. What's your mood? Your company's called Lucid Mood. How's your mood today? What mood are you in?
I'd say it's between relaxed and blissful.
Okay, great. That sounds good.
We call chill.
Chill. Well, I like that. Yeah, I was looking at your website and you've got kind of what moods do you want to pick? But before we jump ahead there, why don't we just start off with what do you guys do? What is Lucid Mood?
Lucid Mood is a brand of cannabis, and it's unlike any other brand that's out there. Instead of starting with an extractive strain, sativa or indica or whatever it might be, we actually begin with the individual cannabinoids and terpenes, and then we combine them in very precise ratios to produce a very specific effect while eliminating or greatly reducing the negative side effects that keep so many people from enjoying cannabis.
Okay. So this is a strain of weed that you buy at a retail store, or the product on the website looks quite different?
No, not a strain of weed at all. We deliver our formulas through disposable vape pens.
Okay.
So for example, this would be an example of our party pen. It's designed to be an alcohol replacement, and it produces the diminishment of social anxiety and social inhibition like alcohol, but it keeps you very alert, clear-headed, energized, and enthusiastic through the evening, unlike alcohol.
Very interesting. So, and I was looking at the website, looks like you sort of come and pick your mood: energy, chill, party, calm, relief, sleep. And so I would buy a set of disposable vape pens that give me this very precise formulation of results. So is the engineering on tell me what the engineering is. Is it the breeding of the certain strain though? I guess I'm still missing.
No, we're, if you took a strain like, say, Blue Dream, and you were to do a chemical analysis of it, of the psychoactive ingredients, you would find it has a cannabinoid THC, it has trace amounts of a cannabinoid called CBG, maybe a little bit of CBD, and then it would have a very broad, about 100 different terpenes in it. And the terpenes are actually the component of the cannabis plant that modulates your mood. It's also the active ingredients in aromatherapy. So if you're familiar with like lavender aromatherapy, there's primarily 3 terpenes in there. One's relaxing, one's euphoric, one's kind of immobilizing. And we actually take the 2 of those 3 terpenes, the relaxing and euphoric ones, combine that with THC and CBD, and that's our chill blend. And we put that into a disposable vape pen, and then when people consume it, they get precisely the mood they're looking for, but they also remain it doesn't cloud their mind. They don't get paranoid or tired, forgetful. So hence the name Lucid Mood. You get the mood you want and you stay lucid, unlike other cannabis products where you become tired or foggy or paranoid or socially withdrawn.
Very interesting. And each pen is this something that's going to last me all night? Is this a one-hit wonder? What's the sort of form factor and the pricing, if you don't mind sharing?
Sure. Well, there in California, you get about 100 sips per pen, and each pen has a milligram of THC, a milligram of CBD, and about 0.5 milligram of terpenes in it. And so one party pen, you and 4 or 5 of your friends, it would certainly last your group the whole evening. If it's just you on your own using sleep to support you in getting to sleep at night, it might last you a couple months. If you're using our Calm pen to take the edge off when you get home from work or before you pick up the kids or whatever it might be, it might last you a couple of weeks.
Gotcha. And price point?
So the price point in California is about $40 per pen.
I can see that scenario. I'm walking in to deal with my screaming kids, and I need that Calm pen just for a few minutes of Calm pen before facing the hurricane. I'm sure that's not an uncommon scenario, right?
No. Yes.
Where'd you come up with this idea? This sounds like it's got a lot of chemistry and science behind it. Where'd this come from?
Actually came in two phases. So when 6 years ago or so, after Colorado legalized recreational cannabis, I'm in Boulder, Colorado, I went to a dispensary not having consumed in several years, walk in, and I'm just overwhelmed by the choices. There's all these bizarre strain names: Durban Poison, Day Wrecker, Gorilla Glue, Blue Dream. I have no idea what that means, but I think I'm smart. I have a chemistry background and whatnot. I consumed when I was in high school. So I asked, which of those has the highest percentage of THC? And the person points it out, and I said, great, how much more expensive is that one than the other ones? At this point, the bud tender looks at me kind of strangely. The other bud tenders are looking at me as well. And, well, they're all the same price. Well, why doesn't everyone buy the highest THC one? Oh, because they all do something completely different. What do you mean? Well, this one's great for going to sleep. Blue Dream's wonderful if you have a creative project. If you want to hike up a hill at high speed, Durban Poison would be my first bet. And I'm like, seriously? All these produce these different effects? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, I'll take a gram of each. So I took a gram of each home with me. And sure enough, they all produced very different effects. So I was fascinated. What could possibly be causing this? I thought marijuana was just THC. And in the research that I learned about terpenes, and I learned how terpenes interact with the THC to modulate your mood. And I quickly kind of figured out what I would use each of these strains for. So I, labeled them, hike and sleep and TV and sex and stuff like that for what they would enhance. And that was pretty exciting for a couple months. But for me, I'm one of, which I later learned, about 40% of adults who find THC very impairing. And I'm sensitive to the impairments of THC. So it just kind of was a non-starter for me. I could use it in the evening, that's fine, didn't interfere with things. But the next day, I just wasn't as sharp at work. And I needed to be sharp at work. At the time, I was working as an executive coach with senior level people at Fortune 500 companies. I had to be at the top of my game every single day.
Yeah.
So I gave up marijuana yet again. And a few years after that, this was in the early part of 2015, a parent called me, a friend of mine called me and said, hey, my teenage son is using marijuana and I'm really worried. I read that it's going to reduce his IQ and take 10 points off and these other things. I can find anything I want on the internet. I don't know how safe this is. You're a scientist. Could you tell me? So I have a behavioral science background. I think she probably thought I was a neuroscientist, wasn't making that distinction. But, I can read PubMed like the next guy. So I went online, started doing some research, and I stumbled across this article about how CBD could be used to mitigate the paranoia, the social withdrawal, the memory impairment, and the lethargy associated with using cannabis.
Interesting.
I then found that there was a prescription drug being used outside the United States called Sativex that was based on a 1-to-1 ratio of THC to CBD, and that is being used for neuropathic pain associated with multiple sclerosis. And the longitudinal studies on the people that were using this medicinally showed no impairment in cognitive functioning, no impairment in long-term memory. You will see impairment in long-term memory in people that use straight THC. So that started to become really interesting to me. It's like, wow, between what I learned about terpenes, what I've just learned about how to use CBD to mitigate the negative effects, the adverse effects of THC, and then what I was also learning about some of the other trace cannabinoids, particularly CBG, it's like, wow, if I think of cannabis not as a drug in of itself, but as a drug development toolkit, what could we create? And quickly, I began to form some kind of educated guesses, some hypotheses based on what I was reading, that we could create a benzo replacement, an opiate replacement, an alcohol replacement, something that would, support people in having better concentration if they, suffered from ADD or ADHD. And so I pulled a team together and we gave it a test. And for all of us, our first Lucid Mood experience was the most pleasant cannabis experience any of us had ever had. So we got super excited. And that's when I went out and raised our first round of financing and incorporated the company. So that was how we got started. I would later hire a top-notch neuroscientist who specialized in the endocannabinoid system, to add him to our team and bring out what we believe are hands down the best formulas in the industry.
That's interesting, kind of how you framed it as, cannabis is not just like a single drug, but sort of as a drug development toolkit where you have these different components you can mix and match in different formulations. That's pretty interesting. Yeah. So I grew up in Boulder.
Oh, wow.
And, it was, this is in the 80s, and it was a pretty wild time and a lot of cannabis around. And the way we would acquire cannabis is we would go to one of our parents' houses, who usually had a brick of Maui Wowie in the freezer and gave a little bit off. And so that was the way we scored pot back in the old days. And it's funny, I quit for a long time, and just because kind of the same reasons you gave of like, it would make me stupid, and I've got like a startup to run. I can't deal with being stupid.
Yeah, so, we playfully refer to Lucid Mood as, the elevation without the stupefaction.
Interesting. That's a good tagline, kind of. Very interesting. Okay. So then you raised some convertible notes to build the actual vape pen prototypes, or what's the?
Yeah, so we did our first round. We raised $250,000 on a convertible note, and we used between that and all the members of the team working without salary. A year later, we released our product into the Colorado market, which I was very pleased with, to do that much R&D. We run all of our formulas through clinical style trials to verify that they in fact do what we say and avoid these negative side effects. And so we launched in Colorado in November of 2016, actually the day before Thanksgiving. And then early the next year, we expanded into Rhode Island and Delaware. I set up the company as a brand licensing company. So we actually don't touch THC, we don't touch marijuana. We'd technically be called an ancillary company. So we do the R&D, we develop the branded device and packaging, marketing collateral, all of that. And then we sign up in a sort of franchise-like manner, we sign up a manufacturer distributor in each legal state, who then creates the product and sells it into the dispensaries in their state.
And why is that? Is that just to avoid having to deal with cross-state regulations and things like that, or what's the point of that?
A lot of reasons. So one is it tremendously reduces the amount of capital that we would need to raise. It's why franchises are so popular. you find a formula that works in one place, and then you franchise it out to others to replicate that formula. So that was one of the rationales. The other rationale was if we actually manufactured the product, then we would need to get state-issued licenses to manufacture and distribute a product that contains THC in each of these states, which is a huge headache and can take, depending on the state, months or years, or you might not be able to do it at all, particularly the East Coast states that have a limited number of licenses. So it seemed a lot smarter to us to where the exit value of the company, we believe, is going to be how much penetration and brand awareness and loyalty do we have at the time that we sell the company to a Diageo. So in terms of speed to market, if we were to partner with someone who was already growing cannabis and extracting the cannabinoids and manufacturing products and distributing them to dispensaries, we just plug into their platform. And in a matter of a couple months, our product is on the shelf in that state.
So the note, the convertible note, was that raised just from angels there in Colorado in the cannabis space, or friends and family? How'd you get that off the ground? And before you answer, it seems like there are obviously a million cannabis-related startups sprouting up. No pun intended. Hard to avoid the puns in this space, right? But a million cannabis things sprouting, like, and there seems to be a sort of a confusion of how to raise money, especially at the earliest stages, right? You've got public money, but maybe talk about that, raising that convertible note.
Sure. So I didn't see a reverse merger onto the Canadian Stock Exchange as a viable option for us, for some period of time. So that was kind of off that wasn't an option. And traditional angel networks, when I went and spoke to them, like the one here in Denver, they're familiar with tech, they're familiar with medical devices, there might be a couple other sectors they're familiar with, but cannabis has a lot of unknowns for them. At the time I'm raising money, this is 2015, when I raised my first round, that didn't seem like a very viable option. So I focused on, friends and family. And also there are some kind of angel investor networks that are dedicated exclusively to cannabis. Mm-hmm. One's called Arcview. And so I went and pitched at Arcview and raised some money from some angel investors who were part of that network. And that first round, I'd say was tough. Not extremely tough. Actually, the next round was even tougher in a lot of ways for us, because we had enough friends and family that we could do this. And once we launched the product, then I went out to raise additional funds so we could begin to expand our distribution and everything else. And of course, the situation you have at that point is, as soon as you have a product in the market, then people want to see, well, what's your sales look like? Yep. What's your sales growth curve? And I'd raised enough money to get to market, not enough money to really fuel the whole sales, the revenue growth curve.
Yeah.
And as a result, I had to, I wasn't fitting into a standard model that those, angels, and at this point, kind of micro VCs, if you will, are accustomed to evaluating a company. So those next rounds was tough, but what I end up doing is creating kind of the one advantage of the convertible note is you don't have to wait till you line up all the capital to close. You can close with each investor one at a time, and then I just kept raising the valuation as we reached various plateaus. Signed additional deals, got distribution into other states, but it was absolutely a full-time endeavor on my part. And, was working 30, 40 hours a week doing that, and then another 10 to 20 hours, kind of running the company. So that was really tough. And then things have gotten considerably easier. In December, I raised a very substantial Series A that would give us 18 to 24 months runway. I could turn my attention back to, filling out the management team, really refining our strategy in collaboration with our venture capital firm, getting everyone on track, and then resuming, I think, one of the things I do best at, which is kind of the business development of signing up additional partners in other states and Canada, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So let's kind of go to that middle round a little bit more, because I think that is an interesting point, right? You got the Series A, or sorry, the initial seed done to build the product, then kind of entered that valley of death. Actually, that a lot of startups come into, where like, all right, they've built the product, but they don't really have traction and they need to go raise more money. That's a really tough valley to climb out of. So other than working 30 to 40 hours a week, fundraising, what did you do? Was it just a numbers game, talking to a lot of investors, or any, tips, tricks?
Well, so I think as a generality, angel investors tend to know other angel investors. Something which is really specific in the cannabis domain is a lot of angel investors will I found we're kicking the tires, but one of the qualifying questions I learned to ask early is, have you made any other investments in the cannabis space? And if the answer was no, it was going to be an uphill battle. It was going to, because I have to convince them of the worthiness of investing in the space, much less the worthiness of investing in my particular company.
Yeah.
Once I found an investor that had an investment in the cannabis space, it's like, well, who else do you know that this deal might be attractive to? What investors have you, what other companies have you invested in? Do you know the other investors in that firm? Would any of them be interested? And I found myself almost living kind of hand to mouth, raising, 25, 50K at a time, to meet payroll for a period of time. And then I was able to create enough of a runway that I could kind of, take money from an angel investor if they came to me on their own, but really focus on going after the venture capitalists in the space. And at this point, we had enough traction. We were approaching a $1 million annualized run rate on what's essentially a recurring revenue business with our licensing revenues from our partners in at this point 4 states. And then I, some combination of good fortune and we really are a good company. I secured investment, a term sheet from. It wasn't the first term sheet I received, but the first term sheet I was happy to accept from arguably the top venture capitalist in the cannabis industry.
And that's Gotham, is that correct?
Gotham Green Partners, yes.
Yeah. So, okay, so just to put a pin on the middle round where you're sort of going hand to mouth. So for a period of how many months you're raising 25K checks on kind of a rolling basis on that note? Is that right?
It was almost 2 years doing that.
Yeah, and how much did that round total over that period?
Close to $2 million.
Okay.
So I'd raised $2 million before I raised the $4 million Series A.
$2 million rolling round. Was the note increase or changing terms throughout that, or was it kind of, here's our convertible note, we're just constantly rolling and raising on?
Sure. So the first round I sold at with $1 million valuation cap and a 20% discount, and the last round I sold at a $6 million valuation cap and a 10% discount.
Yep. So you kind of adjusted the cap and the discount as you're rolling, as you're making progress. Sure. That's really useful data points, I think, just for people to kind of know how that rolling round goes.
Then I had to make sure that the note was written in such a way that at the time of conversion, it was as if each of these rounds of notes were their own rounds, would convert one after another.
Let's talk about Series A for a minute. So you raised a Series A from Gotham Green. What was the process like? Did you just build a list of every Series A cannabis VC and start dialing for dollars, or did you work your angels to intros? Tell us about the nitty gritty on that.
Certainly a combination of both of those. There are a handful of conferences for where VCs and companies get together in the cannabis space.
Like what? Can you think of any top of mind?
Sure. So the IC3 is the conference at which I met Gotham Green, as an example. It's, in my opinion, one of the better ones. So I'm working angels who had been part of companies that had then received follow-on funding. That was certainly an angle that we worked. For a small company, we managed to generate a fair amount of press coverage. So I got some incoming calls from investors. There's also some analysts in the industry that really liked what we were doing. One in particular called New Frontier Data. When they looked out in the horizon and said, okay, what do we think the future of this industry looks like? They would use us as an example of what they called Cannabis 2.0. We're really kind of moving beyond the plant to the actual science, the psychopharmacology of the psychoactive ingredients, and really formulating for effect and to eliminate the side effects. And so they were, investment firms would actually come to them and say, well, who do you think we should invest in, or what are some sectors that you think are going to be hot in the future?
Yeah.
And so we got quite a bit of referrals.
Did you get in with the analysts there? They just heard about you, or did you actually do some outreach to those guys?
They love our product, and they've been tracking us in the space. A lot of our business development, what states we ended up signing up, investors, actually came from people that had tried our product, immediately saw how different it was from anything else out there on the market, fell in love with it, promoted it to their friends. We got a lot of incoming calls from that.
Cool. At this IC3 conference, is that something is there like an application to meet with investors or get up on stage and pitch, or what's the sort of form factor of working a conference like that?
That one less so. That one, you pay one rate if you're an investor, you pay one rate if you're a VC, and then there's content that's going to appeal to both. In the kind of angel stage, the stage before, Arcview is set up such that entrepreneurs can come and pitch from the stage and, get grilled by a Shark Tank of angel investors and whatnot. So, and we picked up some investors there as well.
Is all this money that's going into the public markets and some of these, I'm thinking like the Canadian companies, is that trickling down to what you guys are doing? Is it sort of creating a rising tide, or what?
I'd say they're largely separate with one connection between them. So in the public markets, the companies are being traded on the Canadian Stock Exchange. Any individual investor can go in. They don't need to be accredited, et cetera, and they can buy shares in the company. And everyone conceptually knows that, this is the fastest growing industry in the United States. It's going to be huge. And so in my opinion, a lot of those companies are overvalued. You even look at, some of the top performers in that space, and by their own admission, for them to reach a PE multiple that you would expect from what is ultimately kind of a consumer packaged goods company, even by their own admission, if they execute well on their plan, it's 2024, 2025 until they catch up. So can they then use this capital to make acquisitions and grow and seize the opportunity to justify this valuation in the future? I think some of them are doing a better job of that than others. One way that these companies can leverage that capital is to make investments in the privately traded companies in the US, where it's much, much more difficult because of federal illegality for these companies, whether they touch the plant or they're ancillary to companies that touch the plant, to raise capital. So I think companies like ours are fundamentally undervalued in this space. So, and you are seeing some of this, but due to the securities laws in Canada, those companies can only allocate a small portion of their assets to making these kinds of strategic investments in companies here in the US.
Does this change how you think about just building your startup? I mean, reading between the lines, what I'm hearing, at least a little bit, or my analysis would be, hey, you're going to be a quick acquisition target before too long. Does that change how you think about fundraising, or you just build the business? Like I'm kind of thinking, if you're probably going to be a good acquisition target by one of these Canadian companies that needs to feed their product line and their revenue growth, do you try not to raise much more money so that you're retaining more equity, or are these things not connected? Do you understand the question?
Sure. See, so a number of ways one could go here. And so first off, we've already received acquisition offers. I've received calls from investment bankers that would be happy to shop us around to multi-state operators for whom both our formulation expertise would be interesting, as well as having a branded product ready to go, distributing through their channels. So those are interesting, but in my opinion, premature at a current valuation. Better is to take strategic investments from these firms in exchange for exclusives in their particular distribution area. So, for example, we're in conversation with a couple of Canadian firms about doing a joint venture, making a strategic investment in us, where they would become our manufacturing distribution partner for the brand in Canada, and they would get a piece of, they would get equity in the company as a result. What I like about this general strategy is each of these strategic investments is building in a potential exit strategy for the company. And when that time comes, when we do wish to exit, of course, we're going to get a higher valuation, the more people that are interested in acquiring us.
Yeah, very interesting. Did I read something that Juul spun off a Canna vape pen recently, or am I imagining that? Is there?
Not imagining that. So there's a company called PAX, which has a product called the PAX Era, which is very similar in the hardware is very similar to the Juul, and the whole concept of you have a battery and then you have a cartridge and you use up the cartridge and you replace it. What they've done, which I think is really, really brilliant in the cannabis space, is Juul has essentially established themselves as the market leader in the e-cigarette space. There are many companies that were doing something similar to Juul, but who would be top in any given year changed every year until Juul, which has held that crown for, I think, 3+ years at this point. What they did in the cannabis space is saw that the standard for a battery plus a cartridge that screws into it, there were a number of problems with incompatibilities between certain batteries and certain cartridges. The cartridges were of varying quality, some of them would leak, and so they seized the opportunity to create a proprietary platform where they would have third-party brands fill their pods with their cartridges with their particular product, and essentially create a dispensary within a dispensary allocated to PAX and their partners. Brilliant strategy, and they've done very well with it.
Interesting. Did that spin out of Juul and raise money, or is it part of Juul's umbrella?
I don't know the history, but at one point they were the same company. I don't believe they are anymore.
Interesting. Very good. Well, lots of cool stuff here. You're sort of making me want to get back into the consumption space. It's been a while. If people want to, actually, one last question. Anything else that you would want to tell your younger self if you were starting this all up again and getting out there raising money, or have we covered a lot of it?
Oh, I think when I reflect on the hardest period of time for us is to really recognize that raising capital is a full-time job.
Yeah.
So, building your company, putting the management team in place, getting everything purring, and much less working in the company and fulfilling some of the roles yourself, doing those things in parallel with raising capital is really, really tough and not terribly effective. So, some do differentlies that I would do is I would have raised more capital, not just raise enough capital to each time make sure I'm raising enough capital to get to the next plateau, get the company purring, and in a place where I can shift most of my attention to raising the next round, 12 months before I need the money to make payroll.
Yeah.
And I've done that this time, but the early rounds were tough. I didn't do that then.
Good. Anything else? Any other kind of lessons learned or things you'd do over?
I think we would have raised our first round faster if I had started with a lower valuation than the one that I did, and end up lowering the valuation to get the money in the door. So I think if I'd been more time to market focused than valuation focused, that would have served us.
Yeah.
But overall, I'm happy with where we're at, and we're doing well.
Very good. Awesome. Is Gotham an active investor? Are you leaning on them for a lot of stuff or?
Oh, incredibly. So they have investments all across the cannabis value chain. They see basically every deal as being the top VC. So they have a view of the competitive landscape that's far more comprehensive than I do. So I find them extremely helpful in terms of collaborating around strategy, and they see opportunities I don't. They see risks that I don't. So we're able to but yet whatever I end up doing, I've got to manage that. I have to lead it. I have to operate it. I have to make it happen. So I find them very collaborative in the whole strategy domain, and I do lean on them to ensure that we have the best strategy at any given point. The other piece is once I've laid out the strategy for them, they open up their Rolodex, they make introductions. I'm one or two phone calls away, often through them, from any other CEO in the industry. So they've been incredibly helpful, huge value add, best partners I could have asked for.
That's great.
Very happy with.
For any startups that are hoping to pitch them or lucky enough to get a pitch meeting, any tips on pitching them? Are they driven by metrics or vision or all the above? Yeah.
Well, you only have one chance to make a first impression. So I'd say have all your ducks in a row. They're very focused on the CEO and the management team. And they're really looking for high quality people. I would say that if you can, get a warm intro through one of their portfolio companies, probably even better.
Good. Awesome. Well, Charles, this is great. So if people want to learn more, it's lucidmood.net, correct?
Correct.
And anything to plug, or if people want to try this out themselves, I guess, they can't buy it online, right? So where do people purchase this?
So our current set of products contain THC, so you can't buy that. That can't be shipped across state lines. In California, there are delivery services that will be carrying our products soon. MyJane.com and SocietyJane.com. MyJane's in Orange County. Society Jane is in the Bay Area. They'll soon be carrying our product. If you go online to lucidmood.net and you click on our locator, you can see what dispensaries carry our product depending on what state you're in. We're just now launching in California, so we'll be on the shelf there soon. And we are bringing out, in a couple months from now, we're bringing out a line of THC-free products that are CBD, other cannabinoids, and other terpenes, which will be available in both brick and mortar chains as well as purchasable online. And the first product is called CBD Lucid Mood Unwind. And it's just fantastic for just any kind of stress. If you do a little bit before your commute, you're not going to have the typical road rage on your way home on the LA freeway or whatever it might be. So we have everyone who's tried the product just won't give the pen back. It's really nice, and you're not impaired or intoxicated in any way.
Very good. All right. lucidmood.net. Check it out. Sounds like some interesting stuff in the works. So to a brighter, calmer America or something. I feel like there's some, salutation here. So
thank you, Nathan.
All right. Thanks, Charles.
All right. Bye-bye.